Very good. All right. So to get started, I want to create a little bit of, so as I was saying, a lot of people were asking about sort of practical end games, chess psychology. We were talking about how to maintain tension, a lot of things about decision making. So I'm going to try to make this lesson as relatable and practical as possible. And so the first thing I'm going to do is set up a position. Uh, White to move and win. No, just kidding. This is the default position. If I flip the board, is black on the bottom? Okay. Okay, now it's black to move and win, the French. Okay, no more jokes. To business now. Going to a position here was an online game I played. And I have the black pieces. And this is a position that I felt pretty good about. I was up material. I felt I had really active play, but I wasn't sure how to play here. And I want people just to share their ideas in chat. Like, please don't jump on audio, but in chat, think for a little bit. What would you play here as black and why? And there's tons of good moves here, by the way. But I was just like completely unsure what to do. So I'm gonna give everyone a little bit of time to think, and feel free to share some ideas in the chat. Black to move.
First of all, like b2 looks hanging, but after queen takes, there's rook b1. So unfortunately, this thing doesn't work. Probably there's something tactical. Not sure, by the way. Probably bishop to b2 looks nice.
Okay, I'm seeing some answers slowly trickle in. Take your time.
Bishop to
feel free
f6
to
looks
share
nice.
an idea in the chat and a move and why you would play it. Hey, Ajay, thanks for making it.
Probably there's a possible way to reroute everything, like queen d5.
So great answers. Notice we don't have like everyone coming up with the same answer.
Yeah.
I'm glad you shared the same struggles I did. I wasn't sure what to do. I noticed a number of people, I heard bishop f6, solidify the bishop and maybe double rooks. That's a clever idea. And the bishop would also block potential pressure from the rook here. I like that recommendation. I saw someone say, hey, the first question is, if I can take a pawn, why can't I? Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, he called himself a pawn grubber, and he exactly had that attitude, which is like, if I can have a meal, if I can eat that pawn, why shouldn't I? And I think that's a sound move as well. A lot of people also said bishop f5. And I'm going to only respond to part of bishop f5, which is an idea that if I take, someone is making the point that the king is overworked because the king is guarding both the bishop as one of the two defenders there versus my two attackers, and the pawn on h3 is only defended by the king. So that's a clever move, and I'm only going to respond to half of it. Remember this, because I'm going to show you what happens in the game. So tons of good moves. And the move that I thought about was, the bishop's pinned. And so if I play the move queen d5, which some of you said, I'm not hanging my queen, even though it looks like my bishop or the bishop could take my queen, it would expose the king to check. And what I'm doing is I'm putting pressure on the bishop. And if my opponent makes a random move, I'm going to then take advantage of this pinned bishop and play queen takes pawn. That's how I was thinking during the game. So I have a plan. I've centralized my queen. When in doubt, centralize your pieces, move back to the center, and then you can kind of swing across the board, create some pressure. And if my opponent plays a random move, I'm probably going to take the pawn. Okay. So in the game, my opponent played queen to e7. And I want to try to do a test here. Not like a serious test, more testing to see if I can get the quiz to work. This is a survey. And basically, you'll see a position show up, and I'll ask you to try to solve the problem. And don't worry, I'm the only one who can see it. So if you share a move, it's only for my eyes, and then I can kind of see how people are thinking. But in the game, my opponent played queen e7. And so if I use kind of the plan, I move here, then I go there, I have this move. And so this is what I want to kind of test to see if we can do a quick interactive quiz. What would you play here as white in response to this? Now you should see a quiz pop up.
Oh, and there is mate coming, I think. Queen takes f8, king takes, check and mate. And I think this is like a regular puzzle. Yeah. And it's done correctly.
Okay, great job, everybody, adding your thoughts here. Like I said, don't worry. If I do create another quiz, I'm not sure if I will. In this case, there's one particular answer that's very important, but in general, there's many good moves. But this is just for me to see how the class is thinking. So great job, everybody, throwing out some ideas. Okay, awesome. Great work, everybody. So going back, if we look at this position, remember sort of my thought process here that I think we can all relate to is this idea of I move here and then I move there. It's very easy to say I'm making this move, and then on the next move, if I'm allowed, I'm going to play this move. So when my opponent plays a random move like a4, I have no problem taking this pawn. The bishop is still pinned, so I'm just intensifying the pressure here, and winning a pawn feels great. The issue is when your opponent makes a move and it seems like it doesn't do anything, it's really easy just to be like, oh, whatever, I'm going to take this pawn. So a big piece of advice I give, whether you're a beginner or a master in this class, is give your opponent an extra move, okay? I will admit in this online game, so if over the board, if you touch a piece, if there's a legal move, you have to make it. In online chess, there is no such rule. I will admit I touched my queen in this online game and I hovered it over the h5 pawn. And only at that moment did I recognize, oh no, oh no, my king. And Anatoly Karpov is a world champion, and he made the quote, you see more between, like when you're thinking for 10 minutes, for example, on a tough position, Karpov's point was the second you let go of your piece and you reach for the clock, you see more in that like half a second than you did the last 10, 20, 30 minutes. We can all relate to that. I see Alex nodding his head. Alex plays OTB, plays game in 90, so he knows about deep thinks. So then all of a sudden you make a decision and then everything's clear, right? So in this position, what you need to do is think about contact points. Where are the new spots of tension? So when the queen moves to e7, still attacking a pawn, and a pawn, but what about the rook, right? That's a new piece of tension. So when you're stressed and you're on the move, flip the script, give your opponent an extra move. And in this case, forcing moves first, I nearly overlooked queen takes rook. So for those of you who said bishop d6, good thinking. You're piling up the pressure against f8. But before you think about a threat, try to be a little more forcing. Say, hey, I have a great idea here. Can I be even more dynamic? Can I be even more direct? And sure enough, your coach of the hour here nearly blundered a force mate. Maybe a daily puzzle coming soon your way. So stay tuned to that. But just a good example that danger is everywhere, and that if we blink or sort of fall asleep just for a moment, tactical opportunities are always lurking. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, meaning there's tactical opportunities for us as well as our opponent. So in this position, for those of you who said bishop f6, well, here's your moment. Because now I played bishop f6 to reveal the rook and the queen defending d6. So that way, if they try to sacrifice and play bishop d6, I'm not moving back here to get mated. No, I'm going to take the bishop. So just wanted to point that out as a warm-up. Remember earlier, I said I was going to tell half the story about bishop h7 or f5. This is the other half of the story. So for those of you who said, I'm going to develop a piece and I'm going to put pressure here, you're also creating a window for the king. That would have potentially prevented some really annoying checkmate possibilities because I'd have an escape. So that was just a good warm up. And really good participation, everybody. Really appreciate everyone doing the quiz and sharing your thoughts in chat. I might not get to every comment, but I see you and I will check the comments as I can. And wonderful work. Now, I want to also recognize someone here that may not be aware that I'm sharing this game, but hopefully it's okay. I also want to talk about a question not asked by this person, but this person gave a good example of how to handle it. How to handle tension. I think a big issue when you're playing chess, you know, the second there could be a capture, for example, there's a tendency just to remove the tension, like right away. You know what I mean? Like bishop f5, bishop d3, and you're like, okay, I'm taking. That's in my face. I'm just going to take. And I'm a big fan of to take as a mistake, unless it clearly makes your position better or your opponent's position worse. So like after bishop d3, just as a random example, I'd at least want to consider the possibility of moving the bishop here. And the reason why is rather than taking and helping white develop, look at my bishop disappearing, look at the queen taking over center stage. At the very least, I would want to consider what would happen if white captured on my terms. Yes, I get doubled pawns, but now my rook opens. So I just want to make a point that in my experience, when there's tension and discomfort, we have a tendency on the chessboard as well as in life to just resolve it. Just be like, okay, let's take care of this. This is unpleasant. And in chess, often it's the case, you want to build and maintain tension, right? Another just, you know, good example of this is someone in our Improvers Club, hopefully can hear me now. She was having some audio issues earlier. She played a fantastic game that she shared with me. And I could show the whole game, but I'm just going to get to this moment. Really good example of looking for tension. She was able to win material, played a wonderful game. Her opponent went for a big checkmate attack. You wouldn't know that now, as solid as her king side is. But at the time, she was under huge pressure, did a great job refuting the attack. But now the opponent plays d5. And this is an example of what I mean about when you see tension, the very first thing we look at is d5. Hey, that pawn's in my way. That's really annoying. I'm going to take this pawn, right? I'm not saying that's good or a bad move. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be neutral. But what you want to do is understand, number one, okay, we have tension here with the pawn and the queen, right? We also see the pressure against the pawn here, so it's unpleasant. But the big thing is, as some people are saying in chat, is pawns open windows for pieces. Remember that. So when you look at a pawn putting pressure here, right, you can kind of zoom into the crisis and be like, oh, got to get rid of that pawn. So for those of you who asked the question in the Improvers Club, can we talk a little bit about tension? This is a good example of it. Is tension has a tendency to make us zoom into like one square. But then when you zoom out, I'm seeing a lot of people in chat saying, hey, pawns open windows for pieces. One move ago, this bishop had not the most thrilling job staring at a pawn, right? But once d5 was played, all of a sudden, the dark square diagonal is wide open. So a member of our Improvers Club here, H Hart 10K, played queen f6, beautiful move. New move, new piece, activate your pieces, space left behind. And so she tolerates or maintains the tension and now threatens mate. Her opponent played rook d4. And here I thought, okay, she's going to take the rook, and that's a good move, wins material. And she surprised me with an even stronger move, queen f2. How about that for maintaining tension? Great move. She could have captured the rook, but instead you're putting pressure on the rook, and now you're pinning the rook to the queen. Just a beautiful idea. After the rook moved here, again, my instinct, cash in, take. No, no, no. Invite all your pieces to the party. Just a beautiful idea. And this is an adult improver that started learning chess as an adult. I mean, taking it seriously. And I just think that's worth hearing, is that I see a lot of younger people in the audience. Welcome. Thank you so much for making it. But I also want to speak to the adults. We know how difficult it is to improve as adults, and it's just nice to celebrate these kind of games. And so by creating this incredible tension, now mate again is threatened. And I think in the game, Black ended up collapsing with queen a5. And then she delivered mate, bravo. But I also want to make a point, after rook d2, There's no salvation to be found here, or blocking with this rook, by the way. Here's an example of that queen potentially hanging. Here, maybe black could say, okay, you attack me on the second rank. What is the space left behind? Queen e1 check. And this would have also led to a win. So just wanted to give us a warm up of someone in our Improvers Club that answered a question without even meaning to. Is that one of the questions say, hey, can we talk about tension today? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so when tension is being created, our first instinct, whether you like it or not, is to take in the most natural way, right? Nobody said, I'm going to play queen d5 here, right? I mean, maybe you did, but I assume not. But a lot of us, at least speaking for myself, I would play ed5 in my head before playing. You're like, oh, okay, get rid of it. Get this pawn out of the way. But you have to zoom out. Pawns open windows for pieces. What is the space left behind? And to give you a really good visual of what I'm talking about, look at where the pawn is capturing, where it stands. Potential capturing diagonals. When that pawn moves, think of the phantom captures, these diagonals, right? And kind of draw these arrows in your mind and say, these are the windows or squares specifically that are open. And so queen f6, I think, was a really good example. Now, does this only happen at grandmaster or at say amateur level? Actually, there's a grandmaster game that I think is really instructive regarding tension. And this is a classical game. So this isn't a bullet game. It's not a blitz game. This is a over the board. You have at least 90 minutes to think about all your moves with a 30-second increment. So a long period of time. And so this is a really instructive grandmaster game. And this one's gonna be more complicated. I will create a quiz, but again, it's more a survey about how you would play and why. So everyone gets a chance to think and train today. In this position, we have two GMs. I think this was played in Poland, in the Nimzo Indian. Black played knight e4. And notice White's idea of, okay, I want you to capture on my terms. You can take my bishop, but then you're gonna let me develop. This is a pretty strong idea. Castles was played, bishop d3. Now here, black could play d6, maybe clearing a path for the knight. Black could play f5 for you Dutch defense fans out there. Maybe there's not too many of you, but I see you if you exist. I like the Dutch myself, guarding e4. And the other move, is you could take and allow the rook to capture. But black came up with another thought, and black said, I'm going to take on d4. And I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes to really think about this and what you would play here and why, because I think it's a really instructive example regarding tension. And so I'll set up the quiz and I'll give everyone 2 minutes to think.
And there's bishop takes knight, bishop takes knight. So, and after queen takes on d4, there is a potential mate, and bishop is hanging, and then like everything just falling down for black. So, I think white should take now, and then open the file for queen, and then yeah, and then there is mate. Oh yeah, I could be heard. And that's nice to share my thought process.
Okay, seeing some great answers. Really appreciate everybody's participation. Awesome job. Okay. Okay, fantastic job, everybody. Now, this is a game played by two grandmasters in classical chess. Remember that. And so when you see a capture like CD4, you're almost always taking back with the pawn. There could be some exception that you might take with the knight or a bishop, not like that, but like this. But if we go back a move, right? Like let's say D6. Who's recommending bishop takes knight here? I think no one. Because number one, maintain tension, right? Don't trade unless you have a specific reason. And I like to use a term that sounds a little bit weird, but white just surrendered 32 light squares. What I mean by that is you only have one light squared bishop on the board. So even though bishop for knight, you say 3 for 3, and yeah, you can get technical about the numeric value of bishop versus knight, but let's just say roughly 3 for 3, equal pieces. But after you recapture, you captured my knight, but guess what? I have another knight. I captured your light squared bishop. You only have one light squared bishop. So I use the term, you just surrendered 32 squares, meaning this bishop is unopposed, meaning it doesn't have a natural rival, another light squared bishop to oppose it. So this is an example where you're not going to make this trade, and you should maintain tension, which is what the GM certainly would be thinking about. But after takes, this is my point about tension, is that this is a capture. If you're playing a bullet or a blitz game, like you might even be pre-moving something like this, right? Or something like that. But the thing to remember is when you see tension on one square, zoom out and say, what else is going on? Because it's not obvious that the queen now is looking at D4, right? And so by playing bishop takes E4 now, we're threatening to take this bishop, right? So we're not worried about losing this bishop because then we would take the light squared bishop and win a rook. And here the GM instantly resigned. They already saw the writing on the wall in a classical game. I mean, think about that. You're devoting 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of your life to this game, and the game's over in like 10 minutes. It happens, right? It happens. And if it can happen to grandmasters, it can happen to all of us. So why is bishop e4 so strong? Well, we're threatening to win the bishop, like I said. And after the bishop takes, LPDO, loose pieces drop off. When you look at this position, nobody says the knight is loose, but we can say it's nearly hanging, as Daniel Naroditsky would put it. The knight is nearly hanging, only defended by a bishop. So we want to look at all of our captures. So when you see a move like this, sit on your hands or put your hand away from the mouse and say, what are all the captures? Take your time, because captures are very forcing. So now after the bishop recaptures, the bishop is loose, unprotected, queen d4. And there's that battery, just like we looked at in the previous example with black having the queen bishop battery down the dark squares. So now there's a double attack. You can defend mate, but you can't defend your bishop. And if you defend your bishop, you get checkmated. So just a good example of what can happen at grandmaster level, and just a good example about tension. Be careful about your trades. Even a simple pawn trade could be the difference between winning or losing a chess game, even at grandmaster level, even in a classical game. If I said this was a bullet game, you'd say, yeah, whatever. But the fact that this is a 90-minute classical game with two grandmasters, like grandmasters have played these openings their whole life, right? And they know all the theory. Well, they're human too. They make mistakes and they have the opportunity to grow as we all do. Exactly, Artem. Nice to know that GMs could blunder too. They too are quite capable. It's Bartel. If you look in the name here, Bartel, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of the player with the black pieces, but you can look up Bartel and the opponent. So nice work, everybody. I want to share some discussions about endgames and some practical examples here. I think, Alex, you and I looked at this example, so this will be maybe a refresher for you, but should hopefully be new for everyone else. Women's International Master Luciana Morales, she's going to have a simul fairly soon. If you looked at the announcement of this class, you'd also see that we advertised Luciana's simul. Highly recommend to check that out and play if you can. And I was playing a game against Luciana that I think is incredibly instructive from the standpoint of practical endgame play. We're going to talk a little bit about chess psychology. We're going to cover a lot of things here. I'm playing the Queen's Gambit Declined. It's an opening I'm trying to learn. And I played an opening that I thought was pretty solid against her Catalan. And this is a good example too for those of you being like, how do I learn openings? My advice is get out there and blunder, number one, and then check your Chessable course or whatever opening reference you use, because I think the experience of playing can really help you with your opening, right? Understanding. Uh, think of the GM that blundered on move 8 or whatever it was. I imagine that move will never be played again by that particular grandmaster, right? And so that move hurt. That move was really, it was unfortunate, but you learn a lot. And this is one of those examples where uh, I thought I was doing pretty well out of the opening, and Luciana just did a great job kind of allowing me to do what I thought was positive for my play. And all of a sudden I found myself under pressure. And so here's an example where I posted this in our improvers forum, by the way. Somebody asked a question about learning openings, and I played rook c8. And so one thing I learned here, remember, I'm a big fan of do not trade, maintain the tension. So it's very hard for me to find good pawn captures in the center. And so what I learned, I played queen c7, which was okay. What I learned was that the reason I'm playing rook c8 is I want to create pressure down the queen side, right? And I also would love to trade Luciana's Catalan bishop, because that bishop is a good protector of her king, and it's incredibly annoying with creating pressure down the long diagonal. And so one idea here for me is, hey, if I'm going to create pressure down the c file, why don't I trade my c pawn once, and that way my rook has some open lines and puts pressure here, and then I can play the move rook c7. Far from obvious, by the way. I'm telling you all of this because I had a miserable experience in this game. And when I reviewed it, I was like, wow, this would have been so much better. Why would I play rook c7? I captured a pawn, so I'm putting pressure here. I'm dreaming of putting my other rook on c8. And so after rook c1, I can play a really cool move. If you were around in the 1920s, Richard Reddy was creating kind of a hypermodern revolution with moves like queen a8. Check that move out, queen a8. And so now I'm creating all of this pressure down the long diagonal, and I'm clearing a route for my rook. Now I'm saying this as if it was all obvious. Well, look, I didn't play this line. It's obvious to me now because I played the game, I reviewed it, and now I have a really good plan the next time I run into this line. It's like, yeah, exactly. Rook c7 feels really tricky, doesn't it? So anyway, this is a blitz game, so we're only going to cover a couple key moments here, but you're going to see where endgame play becomes important and chess psychology becomes incredibly important. So queen c7, she trades. Okay, we're playing a blitz game, so I'm not going to be like overly critical of all the moves, but I'm just going to kind of give you a sense of how we reached a really important moment. Traded bishops, and I'm feeling great. Like, wow, Luciana's allowing me to trade the bishops. That was exactly my plan. Now I can check, and things feel great. And the next move, I think, is a really high-class move by Luciana, which is continuing with her sort of approach of like, sure, you want to trade? You're going to trade on my terms. So when I captured here, now I activated her knight. Look at that. One move ago, her knight was not very active. I make a trade. She says, thank you. I trade her Catalan bishop. That's good for me, to be fair. But she says, no problem. And she says, no problem, because, hey, you want to trade queens? You're going to trade on my terms, says Luciana. So you get to trade queens, but now you've activated my king, and my pieces are becoming more active than yours in the endgame. So a lot of people ask questions about endgame, so that's why I selected this example. I played b5. I could have captured the pawn, but I thought, okay, I'm going to attack the knight, then I'm going to take with the rook, and I'm feeling great. And then all of a sudden, this move rains on my parade. Didn't see that move. Bishop a3. Attacks my rook and skewers it to the bishop. I could move back, but I thought, okay, I'm going to take the knight. She takes my bishop, and I enter this ending. And so this is an example I want to share because it's like really instructive regarding the psychology of making the first meaningful threat in a chess game. So when you're in the end game, you want to think about king activity, you want to think about piece activity. Luciana played rook fd1, right? And this position, all of a sudden, I will tell you, I saw rook d7 and I started kind of panicking. I was like, oh no, This is unpleasant. I've seen this story before. It doesn't end well for me. And the most important thing here is to figure out, number one, how do I handle this possible threat? Like, what's the best way to do it? And is this the end of the world? Meaning, if you give her one more move, is it the end of the world? Probably not. Like, I can probably still defend, but it feels unpleasant. But I have to admit, let me highlight where my eyes were like this. So I'm like looking at the screen or playing this blitz game. I only looked here. So I thought about rook e7, like some of you're saying in the chat. Absolutely right. Solid move, right? A5 is tempting. I see you there. Absolutely. Rook h5 attacks a pawn. That's an interesting thing to think about. And in this position, there's a lot of interesting moves. But what's so important is when the person makes the first threat, the first active, meaningful threat, they're about to take over the story of the chess game. Meaning, if I play rook e7, and good job of those of you just thinking, hey, this is solid and good enough, you're right. We're okay here as black. But now we're a little bit passive, and our rooks are not communicating, right? So when I looked at the game later, I was stunned to find out there's a move, rook c8, exclaim. I looked at this move for a grand whopping total of 0 seconds. Never thought about it. And the reason why is because I was reacting to pressure, right? I was under pressure. And so I thought, how do I stop her move or how do I discourage it? But look at this idea of rook c8. I'm insisting on being active. And so if she plays rook d7, now I can play rook c2. And I think, Alex, when you and I looked at this position, we talked about rook c2 versus rook f5. So we had the idea of like, why did I play rook c8? Because I want to play rook c2. So it's easy to play this move first. But then if you're threatening check on the next move, maybe I stop you with e4, right? So when you have an idea, like I give you 2 moves in a row, say, what are your 2 moves? My 2 moves are rook, not rook d8, rook d7. I don't mean that way. 2 reasonable moves. My next 2 moves are going to be rook c2 and rook f5. Always flip the order in your mind. Look at the more forcing line first. So by playing rook c8, it's not forcing. Maybe e4 is annoying and stops rook f5. But if you play check first, now look at what happens. The king is under pressure. And once the king moves back, I play rook c2. This is an entirely different story than what happens in the game, which I'll quickly show you. But the only way you find it is, number one, you're going to freak out. Maybe you'll panic. That's okay. Let that wave crash on shore and get ready for the next moment. It's okay to panic. It's okay to be nervous. What can I do next? And so for me, what's important, if you're like a super active player and you're like attack, 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 think about the opposite first, meaning, can I play something solid? Like, is this move okay? And it's like, yeah, it's okay. And the reason I want you to think of the opposite of what you normally do, nobody has to ask you if you're an attacking player to attack, right? I'm a little more positional. I'm a little more solid. Maybe you call me passive. Nobody has to tell me, hey, misplace your pieces or kind of curl up in a ball and hide. I just do that normally. So therefore, think of the opposite. So for me, I need to think of attacking moves and active moves because I don't think that way normally. And so the reason that that's important is because then you can flip the whole script. If I would have said, hey, can I play actively here? I would have found rook c8. Here, check, king goes back. And I don't think anyone's saying black is hoping to draw this game anymore, right? I'm putting pressure here. The pigs are invading on the second rank, and this is great. Now, why do I show you this? You're like, okay, this is all obvious now after the fact. But isn't it interesting that when I was playing the game, I didn't think about that at all. And I kind of misplay this position. I guard the pawn and just sort of blunder here. And even here, this is where you can go on tilt. People talk about tilt. I was kind of tilted here. Didn't like my position. I'm already down a pawn. She's going to play rook b7 and put pressure here. So I'm like, oh, wow, this feels terrible. I'm going to lose this pawn. And what am I going to do? And so this is an example of think actively. So to my credit, I did find rook c8. Okay. I traded the b pawn for the a pawn. And now I was able to hold a position that seemed reasonable, but it's blitz, remember? And here I get into a position where I just need to do nothing. If I just sit, I'm okay. How many people have looked at a game where you're like, oh, wow, the engine was spitting zeros, but I had to do nothing, like move my rook back and forth. It's very, very hard to do that as a human. But what I needed to do here was just say, okay, chill out. I'm just going to stay here and just move my rook back and forth. And the second she moves the king to a square where she's guarding the pawn, play check. Okay. The second the king moves away, go behind the pawn. So for those of you saying, what are some fundamentals in rook and pawn endings or endings in general? You want your rook behind the pawn, not in front of it. Her rook is passive. My rook is very active, right? So I'm behind the pawn, whether I'm defending or attacking. And the other thing here is if white decides to get greedy and says, well, now I'm going to attack your f7 pawn, you might even win the game. Now, that's not going to happen against Luciana, but it's an example where it could happen. So in the game, I lost all sense of balance. I was kind of freaking out. I was under all this pressure. I was low on time. She played this move. And then, sorry, I think it was like here after king f6. I went here, she played this, and then I ran out of time. And it was 3-2 with an increment. So it wasn't like I could have continued to play. So my point is, even though there was a draw here, Luciana did a great job from the opening to the end game, asking practical questions, continuing to put me under pressure. And that when you make the first threat, as she did here, it is very easy to take over the game as the attacker, and the defender might just collapse. So this is just a good point psychologically, is that yes, rook d7 feels bad, but what can I play, right? So shout out to Luciana. Definitely encourage you to check out her simul. You too might have a game to share after that. But just wanted to give an example of what you might see in your own chess. Now, we have a member of our Improvers Club that shared a game with me that I think is also super instructive and will also speak to endgames. So I'm just going to quickly talk about this as well. One moment. I have so many files. That's kind of my challenge. Okay, one moment. For some reason, it's not showing up for me. Okay, I might have to save that for another example. No problem. Oh, here it is. Okay, I found it. All right, so this is from one of our improvers. He's very, very active in our community, and he was kind enough to share this game. Learning from our mistakes, just like I share my game with Luciana, where I was outplayed and she gave me a wonderful lesson. This is also a good example of how to handle an unpleasant endgame. Okay, so here we are. This position. So black is down a pawn. Feels kind of unpleasant. And so what black did was played rook b7 and said, okay, I'm just going to hang tough, put pressure on this pawn. And this game was played quickly, so I'm just going to show you how it was played quickly. And then we're going to go back to what I think was important to do, is he shared this game and he's like, I don't know what I did wrong. Like I had my rooks, I was blocking the pawns, I was attacking the pawns, I thought everything was okay, and I just couldn't stop this wave. And he resigned. So look how fast that went against us here. Is starting here, we tried to hold on to our defense and just a check was played. The rook went behind the pawn. There's that lesson again, rooks behind past pawns. And then you just lit the fuse and those pawn rockets were soaring. We've all been here, right? And so my point is, when you're in a position that feels bad, as is this one, right? So what just happened? Knight takes pawn. He's like, shoot, I just lost a pawn, right? It's very easy to get into a defensive mindset, as I did in my game with Luciana. But based upon what we just talked about, what do you think is a stronger move here? My heart sinks. I feel black's pain. Exactly. And that's my goal today, everybody, is just to make these examples as relatable as possible. Chess improvement can be frustrating. It can feel isolating. It's like, I don't get it. Why am I playing terribly all the time? Whatever. And we got to channel that negative emotion and turn it into something more positive, which is like, hey, this happens to all of us, right? whether you're a beginner or Magnus Carlsen, right? Magnus is struggling right now in Norway, like, you know, so when you have even the highest rated players in the world not being thrilled about their chess, it's like, hey, we're all in this together. And it's really healthy, as Black did here. He shared this game as a really good example of how to improve. Yeah, very good. So we're seeing rook c4 or rook c2, both great answers. I recommend rook c2. And the reason I recommend rook c2 is, remember my position against Luciana. My rooks are blocked and they weren't communicating. So if you play the move rook c2, when you're thinking about how to defend, and I'm talking about be as active as you can, try to put your rook on a very active square where it puts pressure on the most pawns possible. So if I can get rook b2, I'm threatening a2, b4, and f2. So here, rook c2 would have changed the game entirely, right? And so we're putting pressure on the pawn. So if the pawn advances, for example, you just chill out and play rook a2. And so you're putting pressure on the pawn and pressure here. So unlike the other example where these pawns are rolling, it's very hard for them to move. If they play check, for example, no problem, you're here. And look out for the fact that this pawn is pinned. Rook b4 could be a thing, okay? And then the other possibility is like, okay, well, rather than playing a3 and allowing rook here, what about rook a1? That's another question I was asked when I was showing this position. Good question. Now we play rook f5. And all of a sudden, we've changed the script. Think about the position where Black had the rooks doubled here, trying to hold back a tsunami with our bare hands. You know, those passed pawns are just too strong. And here you just say, no problem. You can have your pawns. I'm going for your king. And by doing this, active defense, I would say, far more often will save you than passive defense. I'm not saying passive defense is bad, but what I am saying is don't accept the script. Once you lose a pawn, you're under some pressure. This is where we can get super negative. I know I was in a negative mind space in the game with Luciana. She was outplaying me. So I was like, wow, I'm in huge trouble here, right? And it's so important to kind of hijack your own thinking. So when you find yourself, you know, kind of frustrated or kind of beating yourself up, resurface. How can I play actively? How can I ask a question, right? In our last community class, I told you, ask questions. Try to put your opponent under pressure. Unfortunately, here, we just weren't able to ask any questions, right? We were reacting, and this has happened to all of us. So when I looked over this game with the student, we pointed out this idea of rook c2, and that would have just changed everything. So really good job, everybody. I'm just trying to share as many instructive examples as I can. And we have a question about rook c2. After rook c2, yeah, exactly, good question. They could definitely play rook a8 check. You're absolutely right. And then maybe the pawn is hanging. So you could play something like a3. And here I would probably still just kind of camp out on the second rank. Play rook a2. And if this rook ever moves, I'm going to play rook f5. So, and oh, you meant rook a1? Gotcha. So just to review, if rook c2, if you play rook a1, it feels like everything's protected. It looks like the pawn rockets are going to soar. But always ask yourself, what is the space left behind? What did the rook leave behind in order to protect this pawn and help advance it after, say, a rook check? F2. So then you swing over and you have a competing idea. You're asking your opponent a difficult question. So thank you for asking for clarification. But yeah, really instructive idea. If you have more questions about this position, I'll be happy to take a screenshot of this and share it in our Ask a Coach, Ask a Community, Ask Community, Ask Coach, and our Improvers Club forum, and I will be very happy to talk about it a bit more. So let me show a couple more examples here. First of all, I think this is important to know. This position, very important to know. Let me flip the board. This is Black to move. And I'm not going to create a quiz, but I just want people to think about what you would play here as Black and why. So White is heading down the board. We have the active rook versus the passive defender. If the rook is able to move and then promote, that would be great. And so what should we play here? There's checks. We could move our king over here and say, haha, your king is too passive. I'm going to draw. And this is something that's so important to know. Now, if you move your king up the board, look out for rook e8 check. Because now I gain a tempo. You cannot take my pawn because you're in check. And now the passive rook has liberated the a8 square, and we lose. So you say, okay, well, nobody's going to play that move, right? A lot of people are going to talk about king e7. Why wouldn't you, right? Move toward the goal. Well, incredibly, there's a beautiful trick here. Rook h8. I know some of you know this pattern. Some of you are seeing it for the first time. And this is very important to know, because now I'm threatening to promote. And if you take, there's this beautiful idea of a skewer. And now you win a rook. Okay. So the reason I share that with you is I was doing once a month, I do a chess.com class that's just for staff. And we were looking at this idea about active defense, and we're looking at these interesting ideas with how to defend tricky positions. And so after this example, I'll share what happened in the next game. So when I teach the class, we have a blitz tournament immediately afterwards. So you're going to see what happens in a minute. But here, what you should do is keep your king on g7 or h7. So to review, if you play king f7, doesn't work out. Why not? You can play rook h8. You're threatening to promote. So if you attack my rook, I can play promotion, for example, doing well. And if you take the pawn, there's a skewer. So what you need to remember is, if you're the side defending against a rook on the 7th and a passive rook blocking the promotion square, you actually have to not work toward what you think is the goal, which is to get the king here and attack the rook and the pawn. You have to do the opposite. Chill in the corner. Stay in these two squares, and you will never lose. Because if they play, say, king f2, or sorry, you can't, like rook h8 as an example, just to show you, like, even if, obviously take the rook, but I'm just making a point. If I play here, there's no i8 square. There's no rook i8, right? You can't move to i8. This skewer doesn't work anymore. I just take your rook, okay? So by moving here, all you do now is just go back and forth. And if you want to keep your life really simple, don't even move your king. Just move your rook back and forth, and there's no way you're going to lose this. So you might wonder, okay, for those of you that you haven't seen this before, this is a really good thing to know. Put the king on the H or G files in this example, stay in the corner, don't allow the trick, okay? For those of you like, yeah, I've seen it before. Well, there is two people in the class that I think their FIDE ratings are like around 1,700. FIDE, which means these are strong players. And so it's one thing to know this in a class. It's one thing as we're all kind of chilling out here and learning together. It's another thing to actually execute the idea in the game. Like I mentioned, where I ran out of time against Luciana, it was technically a draw, but I was so frazzled by the amount of pressure she put me under, I didn't feel comfortable, and I had to make a choice, and I ran out of time. Well, look at this example. This was played in the staff class. So black puts two rooks on the second rank, gets super active. And it was the class on rook endings, by the way. So the very next, so we play this blitz tournament. The very next game, he gets this rook ending. He's like, okay, I was remembering this, Coach Dane saying, be active, ask questions. So black did a great job putting pressure on the position. I'm kind of blitzing just to get us to another situation. Gets the pass pawn, rook here. Does this look familiar? Luciana's game. We looked at that example I just shared now. And so here we have two 1,700 FIDE players. So, I mean, if you, I think one of them has a 2,000 chess.com rapid rating. So this gives you a perspective of the strength of the players. They know everything I'm sharing here. And yet it's very hard, as I gave an example with Luciana, to do nothing. If I just sat and did nothing, I would have survived, but it's not easy. So here as white, this is a good opportunity to chill. Just sit. You can move your rook up and down. You can move your king back and forth, like I said before. White gets a little bit funky. White plays king f3, nothing bad. Rook f1, there's no check. Otherwise, that's scary. Okay. He moves back, great. And this is a blitz game, so let's be fair. They're under time pressure. But I get a little bit scared about what White's doing here. White's doing stuff. And if I'm White here, it's like, I don't want to lose this game. And I don't think there's a good chance I'm going to win it. So I should just chill here. Move your king back and forth, move your rook back and forth, whatever. So White's getting a little bit adventurous. And for those of you saying, keep fighting, keep it complicated, you can play king f4. White could have done that because if you play rook f1, dreaming of taking this pawn with check and dreaming of promoting, I'm okay here. I can take you. So White could have done this, but if you have like 3 seconds on your clock, I wouldn't be playing with fire here. I would just go back here and chill. It's funny to say I would do this, but you saw what I did and I didn't do that. But I would do it now if I could, you know, with the mentality of just stay calm. How do you hold the draw? So in the game, king g2 is played. He's moving back and forth. Great. Now I'm scared for White. Why am I scared for White? It's a complete draw. I'm scared for White because White is starting to do stuff. In other words, when I see rook a5, I'm seeing a temptation of taking a pawn. So if I'm White here, I'm just going to move my rook back and forth. I can move my king back and forth. But once I do this, I'm getting really scared because what happens on the next move? It's so hard to do nothing. It's so hard to just play rook a8 and chill and be like, there's no way I lose. I'll give you all the moves you want. You can get your king here, right? I'll check, you know, just to show you. You can go all the way down the board. I won't interrupt you. The second you touch the pawn and try to liberate your rook, I check you. You move away from the pawn, I go back and chill. The second you touch the pawn, I check you. Second you move away, go back to the A file here and chill, okay? The problem is after rook a5, White's doing something. White has a taste. White's tempted. What does White do? I'm playing for a win. What did a 1700 FIDE player overlook? Very good, Flynn. Rook g1 check. Sacrifices the rook, promotes, and then the game ends fairly quickly. White still probably had some chances to try to sit and make it complicated, but then okay, unfortunately, it didn't work out. So my lesson is I'm giving you examples, not just of here's like a random blitz game that are played by say beginners or something. This is, you know, players that are really experienced, strong players, myself included with Luciana, and yet here we are struggling to make good practical decisions. So when people are like, hey, why am I not improving as much as I want at a certain moment? Or if I am improving, why am I doing all these foolish things? Well, I have a little bit of bad news, but hopefully it's mostly good. There will always be an unwelcome passenger on the road to chess improvement. You're always going to have doubt. You're always going to have your own personal challenges, and you're not going to play the moves you know you should play. Like if I showed this to the two people who played with no clock ticking, they would explain probably better than I the nuances of this end game. But with the clock pressure, it's an entirely different game. So really good job, everybody. I'm going to finish with just 2 quick examples. The other thing about the art of doing nothing is sometimes opponents fall asleep. Sometimes opponents can fall asleep if you do nothing or seem to do nothing, okay? So I want to share an example that I played many years ago against, I believe he is a FIDE master. And this was a classical game over the board. I was playing the English. I was feeling pretty cool about rook b1. I saw some Yasser Seirawan lecture about it, b4, b5. But then I kind of changed my mind and I said, you know, I'm going to play knight d5. And I'm feeling pretty good. I'm centralizing my knight. I have this outpost. And I'm playing a FIDE master much higher rated than myself. I was shocked to see knight d8. I still remember the shock. What is he doing? Why is he moving his knight back? It's a beautiful move. If I play a random move and my opponent plays c5, I'm very happy. This is now officially an outpost, an advanced square for a knight that's protected by a pawn, and there's no opposing pawn that can kick me out. But why did he play it? Not to play c5 and make my knight shine. He kicked it out. So already here, I'm like kind of in a not great mood. I missed this plan. I'm moving backwards, and he moved quickly. Like basically he would make a move, kind of slam a piece, slam the clock, and then he'd walk away and leave me with my thoughts. And so then I would make a move. He'd look for a minute, snap out a move. Knight e7. I spend all this time. I'm like 30 minutes on the clock already. I play rook d1. He looks, boom, f5, just hammer blow after hammer blow. Like, I'm just going to crush this guy. And so I was like really scared here already. It's like, oh, wow, this is really bad. And so I play d4, attacks my knight. I retreat, d5. So not the greatest story from White's perspective to allow this huge pawn advance. It feels like I'm getting just completely rolled over here, right? And so I take, and at least I trade queens, right? I play e3. I put some pressure on c5. He stops me. So all of a sudden, I'm hanging tough. I was disgusted with my opening. I felt really bad, but I was able to resurface and be like, what can I do now? Try to push those negative thoughts away from the past. What can I do now? How can I build a better future? And so I play bishop f1. He plays g5. And remember, he's playing quickly. Boom, 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 boom. Like every move felt obvious to him. And he's just attacking, attacking, attacking. I go here, rook c2, rook dc1, take, and he attacks my bishop. So notice, as White, this whole game, I've been attacked, I've been retreating, I've been playing moves like bishop f1, I'm just kind of crouching. I'm trying to do nothing or as little as possible. So Black is in complete control. And that is when you are at your most dangerous moment where you're going to likely blunder. When you hit the autopilot button and you go on cruise control, like, oh, my opponent's playing badly, as I was, I'm doing great, nothing's bad going on here for Black. You get to attack my bishop, feels great. Remember the concept, defensive moves can attack. I played the move bishop c3, and I think he didn't consider the consequences of it at all. Even though he's a FIDE master and very strong, he's been controlling the whole game. Knight c4. I'm attacking your bishop. You react, and now I move on with my life. So he looked at this move, kind of shrugged, played f4 instantly, and then left the board again. They didn't sit at the board. Like, it was like a trivial game. Like, this guy's going to just lose on his own. What did he overlook? Defensive moves can attack. Bishop c3. I'm aligned with the rook, or with the bishop here. If I could push my own pawn, how nice would that be? Bishop c4. He shrugged, took the bishop, d5. Artem, you asked about the Zwischenzug as a concept. That might be something we'll look at in a future class, but this is a good example of Zwischenzug. I threaten the bishop, and I discover the bishop's attack here. So after bishop takes c3, Zwischenzug, an in-between move. Look at the tension, always easy to zoom in, zoom out. Take the pawn with check, Zwischenzug, the in-between move. Now we take the bishop and the game is over. So my opponent resigned. So why do I finish on this example? I finish on this example because chess is hard. Improvement is hard. I played an over-the-board game where my opponent just pushed me around. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt terrible that, like, by move 9 as White, I'm worse, right? I'm playing a stronger opponent. But what's so important is your opponent always, to some extent, relies on your help. They want you to give up. They want you to respond to the way they're playing. And there's always a hope that my opponent is going to kind of give up. And so by hanging tough, I tried to ask questions. I didn't really ask him any questions till the last move, truth be told. I didn't do much. But I refused to resign. And I also dealt with my own negative emotions. I felt terrible about the game. My opponent never sat at the board. I mean, he would just show up, slam a move, leave, right? So I played this whole game basically by myself against an empty chair. And I was just stuck in this negative position. And so I was able to resurface and be like, what can I do now? you know? So even here, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to beat the guy. I was just like, well, I better not blunder my bishop. Hit the ball over the net, keep it in bounds. And hear this caution as an attacker. When an opponent defends, they may also attack. Think about the consequences, not just your guard and your bishop. Look at alignment. Look at what has changed. Here, black said whatever, f4, and he left the board again. That's my point. I was at the board all by myself the whole time. And so all of a sudden he returned, thought it was trivial, and then he resigned and left the board. Okay, so just wanted to share that as a last example for everybody for some encouragement. It's not a game I'm proud of. I didn't play particularly well. I played poorly, but I kept asking questions. And as you get better, you're still going to have these setbacks. You're still going to have these frustrating games, whether you make it all the way up to 2,800. But the more you play and the more you learn from these examples, you'd be like, hey, I've seen worse. I've played worse than this. What's possible now, right? So really great job, everybody. I encourage you to, if you have any questions, to go to our Improvers Club and go to Ask Community/Ask a Coach. If you have any questions you'd like answered, if you'd say, hey, in a future class, can we talk about this topic? Always open to it. And just wanted to thank everybody for all your engagement. Really appreciate the enthusiasm and the Improvers Club and the Improvers Challenge, and I'm here to support your journey. So please stay active in our Improvers Club, and I look forward to talking to you all there. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the Improvers Club. See you, everybody.
А стримлю тут, новости тут, все ссылочки в описании.